crazy that this was YouTube back in the day. Man, how things have changed.
What's up, man?
What's up?
On fist bump?
Because I love kids, you know what I mean?
So I saw Mortal Kombat, and it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, but it wasn't that great either. But before I go any further, I should make it clear, I don't know too much about the source material. I know some of the characters, I know some of the relations to each other, and that's about it. Can't even do a fatality properly. Come on, just... fuck this. But if you ever want to chat about Silent Hill, Zack Snyder, and traps, then I'm your guy. Bet you never thought you would hear those three topics in the same sentence, but hey, welcome to the channel. We like to have fun here. So really, I'm looking at it as just a movie, but I know it's based on a video game, so I'm adjusting my standards a little bit. But to mix it up and to give a different perspective, I brought on my heterosexual life partner, who knows much more about these games than I do. So he can give his thoughts on the movie as a fan who knows the lore and characters. So the first part of this video will be my thoughts, someone who is not a fan of the games. Then the second will be my friend's thoughts, who is a fan of the games. With that out of the way, let's continue.
Oh, I'm gay now.
I did a video recently explaining that I have faith in this movie, and most of that was based off of the trailer and a few clips in the first 7 minutes that I saw online. And boy, do I look like a fool now.
You stupid!
So the story is simple. Basically, there's a Mortal Kombat tournament about to happen between Earthrealm and Outworld. But the ruler of Outworld, Shang Tsung, doesn't want to play fair. So before the tournament actually starts, he tries to eliminate the fighters, and they have to band together and train to fight them off. So no, there's no actual tournament in this movie, and instead sets itself up for a tournament in the sequel, which doesn't really bother me that much. And by setting itself up for a sequel or maybe even a trilogy in the future, they can keep introducing more and more characters with each movie. Yeah, because Johnny Cage isn't in this one, and people are actually upset about that. There's already like 24 characters. You don't want it to get too crowded, so I understand saving stuff for future movies. But before we get into the negatives, let's start off with some of the positives.
If I was really crazy, I'd run up inside an orphanage and torment kids and beat babies' faces with bags of oranges.
The first 10 minutes is probably one of the best parts of the movie. You get some pretty good looking action, Scorpion Sub-Zero fight, and I thought it was a great intro and a very strong opening. Honestly, I think the first 20 to 30 minutes is pretty solid overall. Then you have a decent final battle at the end. I felt like none of the characters were bad, but the only one that really stood out to me was Kano. He was kind of funny and he actually had a personality, and honestly he kept me intrigued for a good portion of the runtime. Scorpion and Sub-Zero were also a cut above the rest when they were actually on screen, and Sub-Zero himself is actually built up to be a threat throughout the whole movie. And even though Scorpion isn't in the movie much, when you finally get to see him I thought he was great. But the rest, Jax, Sonya, Liu Kang, Kung Lao, and Raiden were fine. They weren't incredibly deep and are given very brief backstory. But at least you learn something about them, which is more than I can say for the villains. More on that later. So when it comes to the main cast of characters, they're all passable at least. But I gotta talk about Cole Young. He's a character not from the games and he's made up for this movie. And the best way to describe him is generic good guy number 217. It's like if you ever played a WWE game and you went to create a wrestler, but instead of customizing it, you leave it all as default. That would be Cole Young. The guy's pretty dull. He's not bad, he's just bland as hell. There were some decent fight scenes and some pretty cool moments. The two Sub-Zero and Scorpion fights were good despite being pretty short. Jax and Sub-Zero fighting was also pretty good, but seeing Jax's arms get blown off was awesome. Kano and Sonya fighting at the end was also pretty decent. Also, the movie is bloody as hell, which is a plus because the games are bloody, so that's what I expected. We see some fatalities and they're awesome. I'm happy they didn't hold back on the violence and swearing in general. It's not afraid to be a rated R movie, so that gets a thumbs up from me. The soundtrack is pretty decent too. There's a few times where they remixed the Mortal Kombat theme, and you hear it throughout the movie, and I really liked it. Also, the dialogue isn't as terrible as I thought it would be. Don't really know if that's a positive since it's still not that great, but I'm gonna count it as a positive because I expected so much worse. And that's basically all the good I have to say. The main cast of characters didn't suck, but weren't memorable, except for Kano, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero. And since it's a big cast, I think it's a plus that they were all at least decent. The soundtrack is neat, and there's some decent fights with some cool moments throughout the whole movie, but the fight scenes as a whole could have been handled so much better. Which leads me to...
I would murder a nigga that steal his body from whatever Morganton and take it back to an alley to torture it.
In my previous video, I mentioned that if the fight scenes were done well, then I could overlook the simple story and characters. Well, unfortunately, the fight scenes are a mixed bag. There are only two that I think are pretty solid, while the rest are either really short, shot like shit, or only have one thing about them that makes it interesting. The intro has Hanzo laying out some dudes and overall looked fine. The camera didn't cut much, you could see everything, it looked good. But as the movie goes on, the way they shoot these fights change. They start using these quick cuts and are close to the fighting, making it difficult to see at times. The fluid motion from the intro is changed to a more generic action movie feel. The intro sets a standard, and you hope that it gets better as it goes, or at least maintains that same level of quality. But sadly here, the fights are a huge drop in quality from the beginning. Some better than others, but overall pretty weak. And that's what drags this movie down. I can deal with basic characters, as long as it picks up the slack elsewhere, which in this case would be the fighting. But I feel they dropped the ball a few times. And other than seeing some really cool and bloody fatalities, a lot of these fight scenes are just kind of underwhelming, and didn't get as creative as I expected them to. to. With the fight scenes being as weak as they are, it makes me look at everything more critically, because I'm not having that much fun. Like, let's look at Godzilla vs. Kong. Story is kinda dumb, but the action and fights are so good that I don't care. But here, since the action is so lackluster, it makes the film's problems and shortcomings that much more glaring. For example, the pacing. The first 20 minutes are solid. I think it's a good intro and gets the plot going. But as soon as they leave for Raiden's temple, everything starts to feel choppy, all the way up until the final battle. It's pretty jarring considering how well the beginning of the movie is. Now, if the fight scenes were done well after they leave for Raiden's temple, then I wouldn't really care about the choppiness, because I would have some badass looking fight scenes to watch. But unfortunately, they're not that good. Now, I mentioned that the main cast of characters are fine, and I didn't really hate anyone, but the villains on the other hand are an issue. Sub-Zero is fine, but there's a point where they introduce 4 villains at once, and you're literally given just one line of dialogue about them. I imagine if I knew who these characters were, then it wouldn't bother me, but I didn't, so I'm left scratching my head. The big bad villain Shang Tsung isn't all that great either. He's the ruler of Outworld and wants to eliminate the competition before the Mortal Kombat tournament actually begins, and that's it, he's pretty cut and dry. Also, Melina is here, and the only reason I know who she is because Megan Thee Stallion dressed up as her, so you know, I enjoyed that. But she's basically just another henchman here. The point I'm making is that the villain squad is even less developed than the hero squad, making them even more boring. Although I did like the design for Cabal and Melina, they looked badass. I really wanted to like this movie, but I was disappointed. The cast seemed to really enjoy making it, and they have fun talking about it, and there were some moments that were very entertaining. This movie sets itself up for a sequel, and I really hope it happens so they can improve on the fight scenes and be more creative. Because after watching this, there's definitely potential in a good Mortal Kombat movie. I just don't feel like it was properly executed here. And even though I was let down, I will have to admit that this is definitely better than most other video game adaptations. I don't think it's on the same level as Sonic or Detective Pikachu, but I think it's better than other video game movies in recent memory like Assassin's Creed and Tomb Raider. Overall, it's just an okay movie with some really fun moments. Really just one big mixed bag. And that's going to do it for my thoughts on the movie as someone who's not a fan of the game and doesn't know these characters and lore that much. I am now going to hand it off to my heterosexual life partner, who has much more knowledge than me about Mortal Kombat. And then after his section, I'll pop up again at the end and go over what you guys thought. So without further ado, take it away, my friend.
Yes, it is I, a man with a voice so obnoxious, it will make your eardrums bleed. Are you ready? Because it's me.
I'm gonna keep it real with you, man. I don't know what to do there. Was that an attempt at humor?
Almost like a joke, only it wasn't funny.
What's up, you big goobers? The MK fan for the videos here, and I'm here to tell you why I think the movie is... it's alright. It's definitely not the best Mortal Kombat film we've ever gotten. We all know that honor goes to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the greatest movie of all time.
I'm picking up your sarcasm.
Let's start with the characters, because if there's anything that a fighting game adaptation needs to nail, it's the characters. Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that the 3 best casted characters in the movie are Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Kano. Scorpion is acted by Haruki Sanada, whom most Western audiences know from The Last Samurai. But in Japan, especially in his earlier career, he has starred in a shit ton of martial arts movies, and I highly recommend you guys go and check it out, because he is phenomenal to watch. Despite his age, he still moves around really well, and I think he could have been the perfect casting for this movie. Oh, and why do I say could have been perfect? Because he's barely in the film for 15 minutes. What? The most iconic, most recognizable, and the face of Mortal Kombat is only in the film for 2 whole scenes. Now, I know in the other films, he's had even less screen time, but since Mortal Kombat's been out for almost 3 decades now, he's probably been the most fleshed out character in the franchise, so just having him as a mere plot device in the story is kind of inexcusable. And yes, his whole purpose in the film is to just be a plot device for Cole Young. In the beginning, Scorpion's death allows his dragon mark to be transferred down through his bloodline until it's given to Cole Young, which allows Cole to use his powers. Then in the end, where Cole does some random magic bullshit with his blood and Scorpion's kunai that's only described once through some dumb dialogue with Raiden you probably forgot about, and it summons Scorpion from the Netherrealm to fight Sub-Zero. And the worst part about this is the fact that the scenes between the Arachnid and Grandmaster Blueberry Ice is the fact that they're the best parts of the movie, and it just makes me want to see more of them. Well, on the flip side, Sub-Zero, the other most iconic character in the franchise, is hands down the best character in the movie for me, and practically steals the show. I know it's not the popular version of Sub-Zero, that title belonging to Kuai Liang, aka Tundra, aka Cyber Sub-Zero, aka the Human Air Conditioner. But Big Bro Bihan is the biggest threat and practically beats out Shang Tsung for the main antagonist spot for just how much he's built up throughout the entire movie. I like how now it's actually Sub-Zero who kills Scorpion's clan and family instead of Quan Chi, because now it just makes things even more personal between the two. He's so badass that when the heroes are trying to strategize their plan of attack, that they actually plan on jumping him because he's too much of a problem in a one-on-one fight. This is very satisfying since Bihan's character in the games, especially in the newer timeline, constantly gets shitted on. In the newer games, he does not win a single fight in the story mode, and his only notable accomplishments are from a throwaway line from Raiden mentioning the events of MK Mythologies. Which, it's MK Mythologies. Nobody fucking cares. It also helps that he was played by Joe Taslim from The Raid and The Night Comes For Us. I like the little quirks that Joe gave to him, like when he stares at the bullets from Jax's gun as if he's intrigued, or the way he breaks Cole's daughter's strength bracelet to lure Cole into a trap. It's like he takes his job seriously, but still gets a strange sense of enjoyment out of it, which makes him even more menacing. Keeping on this wave of positivity, let's talk about another character that they did flawlessly. Fucking shit. Kano is a brash, disgusting, loudmouth piece of shit human being who would screw over anybody if it benefits himself.
Hey, fuck you, pretty boy.
I actually like the new backstory between him and Cabal, where it was Kano who screwed over Cabal, and is the reason Cabal has to wear a respirator, instead of it being from the Outworld invasion in MK3. Because it's something that Kano would do, and is a perfect representation of the backstabbing nature of the Black Dragon clan that they're a part of. Some people might not like Kano's humor, and might think he's more obnoxious than funny, which I can understand. But for me, that just makes his character much more better. He constantly tries to piss off the people around him, because he gets genuine satisfaction from their misfortune and their annoyance. And I feel like since he can make some of the audience feel the exact same way for him as the characters in the movie feel for him, it just makes his performance that much better. Unfortunately, the rest of the characters are just kind of meh. I don't think their portrayals were bad, but it just seems like the actors just didn't have much to work with, which makes them fall into the background rather than put forward. I see this even with the fight scenes. It keeps switching between each fight too quickly, so you don't get a lot of time to actually get invested in what's happening in the fight. The only times I did get invested in their fights were when they were about to perform their fatalities, but by that point the fight's already over. Liu Kang suffers from this the most. This guy was the main character of the first 4 MK games, is arguably the most important character in the new timeline, becoming a literal god and keeper of time, cause we all know Shang Tsung's ending ain't canon. Sorry, Sung. But here, he just feels more like an afterthought to make way for the real main character that I'll get into later. For the fuck's sake, even in the scene where Liu is mourning Kung Lao's death, it just feels rushed just so Cole can have a hero moment and rally up the troops. Speaking of which, Kung Lao is probably the only character out of the meh category that I can see as an exception. This feels like they ripped Kung Lao straight from the games and put him right into the movie. From his mannerisms with his hat, to the cocky way that he speaks, hell, even from the flair that he gives to his teleportations. Not to mention, he has the best fatality I have ever seen in a live adaptation of Mortal Kombat ever.
Flawless victory.
But the reason why I put him in this category is because he just feels so underused. He doesn't really get to show off what he can do in a serious fight because he takes Natara out with one move. And before you know it, he gets killed off with Liu Kang being the only person who gives a shit while everyone else is just like, oof, that's rough, bud. Now back to the literal plot armor. And if you think that's bad, the villains I think get even worse treatment. Cabal is alright, but he suffers from the same treatment as Kung Lao. He has the personality and the mannerisms down, but he's not featured and used as much as he should be. But at least he has personality. The rest of the villains just kind of suck. You can switch out Reptile with a random Sarian and you'll get the same results. You can switch out Natara with a random vampire and you'll get the same results. I wouldn't have fucking known this was Reiko if Shang Tsung hadn't said his name. These characters have nothing that resembles their video game counterparts. Yeah, sure, this version of Reptile does look like his Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance design, but in that one he still has a design. He's not just a big lizard man. Natara does not have any type of feature from the game that resembles her character in the movie, aside from the wings. And even then, I still think they look kind of off. Reiko in the games is supposed to be ripped and move around kind of like a ninja, which makes sense since his character was originally supposed to be Noob Saibot in Mortal Kombat 4, but the designers had a hard time designing an all-black character. So they just made up a new character that nobody really cares about. But here, he's just a big, buff, dumb brute, and even his most defining feature, the eye makeup, I barely recognized it. Well, if there's any positive, at least Reptile looks like a threat in this movie. In the games, his whole purpose is literally just to make everybody else look good. That's it. Here, it takes 3 people to take him down. Even his endings are kind of depressing. In Deadly Alliance, he becomes an unwilling host to the Dragon King, and in MK4, he just flat out fucking dies. Speaking of designs, one of the worst things they could have done was not giving Melina her veil. The veil actually holds a lot more weight to Melina as a character than people might think, and not having it in this movie hurts her character a lot. Melina is a clone of Kitana, which is kind of weird since Kitana's not in this movie but her fans are, which makes no sense as an Easter egg when you could just literally put her in the movie. That Shang Tsung made by combining Kitana's DNA with that of a Tarkatan, which explains the big scary mouth. Oh wait, it doesn't, because this movie doesn't explain what a Tarkatan is. Since most people believe that Kitana is beautiful, this in turn causes Melina to believe that she is ugly, which is why she wears the veil. Despite her trying to come across as threatening, she still has a lot of insecurities, which shows just how emotionally troubled she is as a person. Even in some of the intro dialogues in MKX and 11, when characters make fun of her face, she is quick to anger and becomes very defensive about it. She's an interesting character that has a lot of layers to her, and that I feel like has a lot more potential in the future. But here, she's just Monster Girl. Am I missing anybody? Oh yeah, Shang Tsung's here too. I don't really have much to say about Shang Tsung, which is the problem since he's the main villain in this movie. He doesn't have a commanding presence, and he doesn't really draw my attention towards him. He's just kind of there, and I'd much rather just watch Sub-Zero do shit. Compare this to Kerry Tagawa's performance in the 1995 movie, and it's night and day. Tagawa's Shang Tsung just oozed charisma, and when he was on screen, he fucking demanded your attention. Even in the scenes where he's a lot more calmer, he still seems threatening because it looks like everything's going according to his plan. But here, he doesn't feel like the big bad guy. If anything, he feels more like a spectator just watching everything go down. Finally, we've gotten to my favorite character from the games, Cole Young. Wait a minute.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Honestly, I don't mind the concept of bringing in a new character to a pre-existing franchise or an adaptation, but if you're gonna do this, then you need to be extra careful with how you use them, or they'll go down faster than my dick when the hentai is getting too weird. It's a trap! In this case, it doesn't work out, mainly due to the fact that Cole Young is shoved down our throats. The best example of this is when he ended up defeating a character that he had no right to defeat in the first place. Goro was the champion of Mortal Kombat, undefeated for 500 years, and was the prince of the Shokan, and he got taken out by a guy who literally just obtained his powers. Then after that blatant disrespect of a fan-favorite character, Cole's the one who comes up with the plan to take out Shang Tsung's assassins instead of Raiden, even though Raiden's the mentor figure, and he couldn't even let Scorpion get his time to shine since he gets himself involved with his fight with Goldilocks. Oh, and speaking of which, I fucking hate this version of Raiden so much. In every iteration of Mortal Kombat, Raiden is the mentor figure who rallies Earthrealm's greatest warriors to fight and protect Earthrealm. And for the most part, he's very serious and stoic. But that's because he takes his title as Protector of Earthrealm seriously, and he genuinely cares about what happens to humanity and his warriors. Well, except for his Mortal Kombat 1 ending, where he flat out destroys humanity. He's come a long way. But here, he acts like he does not give a single fuck about anything that's happening. He shits on the Chosen Ones as soon as he meets them, flat out puts Cole and his family in danger for the off chance that Cole would unlock his Aracana. And then when Kung Lao dies, He acts like he doesn't give a fuck. Remember how in MKX, Raiden says that Liu Kang and Kung Lao were like his sons? Well, I guess in this version, Kung Lao's the redheaded stepchild that Raiden couldn't care less about. Oh, and guess what? In this version, Raiden is forbidden from getting involved in the conflicts that involve humans, despite him getting involved in the conflicts that involve humans. So how the fuck is he the protector of Earthrealm when he literally cannot get involved in anything that they do, aside from putting a big force field around them? In the games, he's not allowed to get involved in the tournament unless he's directly challenged, but if there is an invasion of Earthrealm, he's on the front lines. But here, all he can do is make a force field and teleport people, and hope that nobody knocks down his staff. Well, that was a mouthful. So are you ready for me to complain about the settings? So the locations in this movie aren't very impressive and are actually really dull. From Raiden's temple to Outworld to Cole's farm and Sonya's trailer? Seeing a farm or a trailer doesn't really get me in the spirit of Mortal Kombat. Raiden's temple just feels like a giant cave, and even though there's a lot of stuff in the background, it still just feels very lifeless and boring to be in. Why couldn't we get Raiden's Sky Temple from Mortal Kombat Deception or Mortal Kombat X? That would have been awesome to see. Or what about the Wuxi Academy, which is the main location that Liu Kang and Kung Lao reside in? It would have been awesome to see these characters explore the Wuxi Academy, seeing these monks do exercises like the monks in the 36 Chambers of Shaolin. That would have been dope. But instead we just get an empty cave with a really boring training montage. Ooh, watch out, Rocky. Your montages have some stiff competition now. And take a look at Outworld. It just looks like a giant desert with a giant rock that acts as Shang Tsung's throne. That's not cool, that's barren and forgettable. Like, you have so many iconic locations from Outworld to use that at this point it's kind of inexcusable. Like, why not use the Living Forest or the Wastelands? Those are two of my favorite locations from the games, and I really want to see those in a movie one day. Or what about the Evil Monastery? That place would have been perfect for Shang Tsung's throne. At least make the sky purple so there's something that'll catch my attention. The backgrounds and locations are so boring that I genuinely did not know that Jax and Reiko were fighting at the pit my first time watching this. Plus, it's the pit. Home to one of the most famous stages with the most infamous stage fatalities of the entire franchise, and neither character use it. What the fuck? Why have a stage that has the most potential for a stage fatality and not use it? It makes no sense. And the last thing I'll talk about is the stupid thing they added with the Arcana. The Arcana is here basically just to cause some Ex Machina moments. Like Jax instantly getting bigger arms to get a rock off of Sonya, Sonya literally learning her power as soon as she gets the dragon marking, or Cole getting legit plot armor to do the most offensive thing to this franchise's fans by killing off one of the best sub-bosses in fighting games ever. It's only here to work for those moments, but the problem is it takes away from the characters' individualities. Sonya, Jax, and Kano suffer from this the most, because in the games they had to rely on technology, gadgets, weapons, and their own wits to survive these fights against these magic beings and creatures. But now, as long as you have a dragon marking, you immediately get a superpower, so it just makes them feel that less special. Overall, despite everything I've said, do I think that this is a bad adaptation of Mortal Kombat? Not entirely. It was clearly made by people who were actually fans of the game, otherwise they wouldn't have made so many references to it, like Shang Tsung using Reptile's real name, or the pictures in Raiden's temple that depict the great Kung Lao, or the portrait of Delia and Argus where Delia's having a vision of Armageddon, or the inside joke with Liu Kang spamming the same move because Kano doesn't know how to defend against it. So it was clearly made by people who had knowledge of the lore. Not to mention, a lot of scenes just feel completely rushed, almost as if the studio was trying to rush this out as soon as possible to make a quick buck, which wouldn't surprise me because it's Warner Bros. But that's just speculation on my part. Overall, as a Mortal Kombat movie, I'd probably give it about a 6 out of 10, or like a C. It's definitely not the most disrespectful adaptation of the source material, because, you know, Mortal Kombat Annihilation and Mortal Kombat Conquest are still a thing, but it's definitely not going to bring in a new audience for the franchise, and there are quite a few things in here that I feel like old fans would find more insulting than good. As a video game movie, I definitely think it's one of the better ones out there, but overall, I don't think it's going to do much for the franchise. Hopefully in the future, we'll finally get that one good Mortal Kombat adaptation that'll just sweep us off our feet, but it's going to be produced by Warner Brothers, so probably not.
That took much longer than I expected. So, that's the thoughts of a fan and a non-fan on the Mortal Kombat movie. And of course, as always, I asked you guys what you thought of it. And I put out a poll that you guys vote on how it was. And surprisingly, the vast majority voted that it was good, with 47%, followed by decent and average. For me personally, I fall into the decent and average category, and really just a bit better than other video game adaptations. I think it's interesting that the poll's results are fairly positive, but the actual comments tell a different story. A lot of comments are people just saying they straight up just hated it, with many preferring the 1995 movie. I personally don't hate it, I'm pretty indifferent to it. There's fun to be had here, and there is potential, but at the end of the day, I was pretty disappointed. So that's gonna do for the video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it, and leave a comment and let me know, what did you think of Mortal Kombat? Is it better than the previous live action attempts, or is there a different version that you prefer? Thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time.
Harry tells me you're quite the gamester. You know, I'm something of a gamer myself. I watched all your live streams on Twitch, it's really brilliant. And you understood it. Yeah, I used the gamer words of my 9th grade teacher. Impressive. Your parents must be very disappointed. Well, I live in their basement, so, yeah,